Oops, sorry about that, everybody. All right, here we go. Quick review for our short quiz. Just going to pick up, after, the Bleeding Kansas and the Potawatomi raid and Brooks and Sumner. And two gentlemen are going to vie to be senator for the state of Illinois. One is the incumbent Stephen Douglas, and the other one is this young upstart Abraham Lincoln. Now, Douglas is extremely wealthy, he's flashy, he's well-dressed, and he's the incumbent senator. And the men are going to engage in 7 debates that are always going to revolve around slavery. Now, Douglas is, thinking that he's going to be able to run for president in 1860. It should be a shoo-in. But as they travel around, it is Lincoln's ability to connect with his audience, to speak their language. You want wheat and corn. You want, dairy cows and you want goats. You don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket. He does extremely well in the debates. And his theme is, he understands that slavery is constitutionally legal, but he doesn't want it to spread beyond its boundaries. He wants to preserve the Union and have an integrated Western, Northern, and Southern economy, making the United States powerful. So he begins to attract attention, and his star is on the rise. His opponent and bitter enemy, Stephen Douglas, says, I wouldn't want to go against this man Lincoln. With his dry jokes and droll ways, he is honest as he is shrewd. All right? He's a strong man of his party, meaning, man, this guy is really, really, really good. And this brings us to this crazy-looking character. No, it's not Mr. Campbell. It is John Brown. And John Brown here takes his eternal oath to fight against slavery. And after returning from Potawatomi, he learned that, preaching was not his calling. He begins the idea of his raid on Harper's Ferry. And in August of 1859, the fuse is lit. The time to stop war coming is quickly running out. And John Brown is going to attack Harper's Ferry on October 16th, 1859. On the way into Harper's Ferry to capture the armory and armed freed slaves, where he wants to lead them as a black Moses into the mountains to have a black nation, he meets Frederick Douglass. And Frederick Douglass says, this man John Brown is willing to die for the slave. I could live for the slave, but that man Brown can die for him. But he tells Brown, look, this isn't going to work. Everybody remembers Nat Turner. Be careful. At home in Washington, on leave, looking at his sick wife, Lieutenant Colonel Robert E. Lee is pressed into service as he rides over to Harper's Ferry because John Brown, one of the things his men did was they took hostages on the way into town. One of the hostages they took was the great-grandnephew of George Washington. And so Lee shows up, he disperses the militia, takes command of the Marines, and under flag of truce finds out that John Brown, and it really is John Brown, he's the crazy guy that ran into like Sherman and Pickett and Jeb Stuart and Potawatomi Creek, and the battle ensues and it lasts 3 minutes. All but a few of Brown's survivors are killed, of his men are killed. 1 soldier and 4 civilians. John Brown is wounded and the rest of his men are arrested. It's ironic that in their quest for freedom, the first guy killed is a free black man who was a business owner who was lighting the street lamps of Harper's Ferry, was shot and killed by John Brown's men. John Brown is then hanged on December the 2nd, 1859, and on the way to the gallows he says, the crimes of this guilty land will not be purged but with blood. It is going to take a war to get rid of slavery. I think, as I vainly now flattered myself, that without blood it might be done. And so the war is now about to begin. Right, here it comes. All right. And in the election of 1860 in Charleston, South Carolina, the Democrats hold their nominating bid. But the Northern and Southern Democrats cannot agree on a platform guaranteeing the rights of slave owners. So the Southern Democrats storm out. They wait until June, where they reconvene in Baltimore. Once again, the Southern Democrats bail out and leave. And while they're gone, the Northern Democrats, will elect Stephen Douglas to be the Northern Democratic nominee for president. Well, when the Southern Democrats return and find this out, they nominate one of their own, Mr. John C. Breckinridge, as the Southern Democratic candidate for president. So the Democrats have not one, but two candidates. Out in Chicago, the Republicans are holding their convention, trying to get a hold of the Western, the frontier vote. This guy, William Seward, is supposed to be the front-running candidate, former governor of New York and a senator. If not him, it could be Salmon Chase of Ohio, working for the Treasury. If not him, then it could be Ed Cameron of Pennsylvania. But Seward goes out when he's told not to, and he takes a platform of abolition. So they get rid of him. Can't do it because you're an abolitionist. We condemn John Brown, but then their leading candidate goes out as a radical abolitionist. Salmon Chase was tied to corruption. I think Lincoln said the only thing he wouldn't steal would be his grandmother's stove, and only then if it wasn't red hot. And Ed Cameron was also linked to corruption. So while nobody could agree, 33% for candidate 1, 2, and 3, everybody liked the last candidate, the secondary candidate, some guy named Lincoln. So a deal is cut that the other major players would serve as part of Lincoln's cabinet. They would control him like, puppeteers and marionettes, and if anything would go wrong, they could blame Lincoln for it. And there is a fourth candidate named John Bell, who ran for the Do-Nothing Party. And when asked, what would you change, or what are the major constitutional issues? Well, I really don't know of any. Well, how would you solve the crises of the day? Well, I probably wouldn't do much, and I'd let them just play out. So we have four candidates for president. Lincoln does not appear on the ballot in 11 southern states. And when the election is held, Lincoln receives only 40% of the vote. But he wins the majority. The split on the Democratic ticket gives him victory. Abraham Lincoln is now the president. The Southern reaction was immediate as the Charleston Mercury prints its headline, "The tea has been thrown overboard. The Revolution of 1860 has begun." Immediately after that, South Carolina will secede December 20th, December 20th, 1860 at 1:15 p.m. by a unanimous declaration. And the quote is given, South Carolina is too small for a lunatic asylum, or too small for a republic and too big for a lunatic asylum, as the paper reads, the order reads, South Carolina will now take her place among the great nations of the world. The union between South Carolina and other states, known as the United States, is dissolved as South Carolina takes her place among the great nations of the world. Followed very shortly after the first year by Mississippi, Florida, then Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas in February. So here is the breakdown. The red are going to be Union states. The blue or purple will be Confederate states. The gray are undecided yet. Now they will eventually swing towards the Confederacy, but Maryland, Western Virginia, and Kentucky are border states that have not as of yet seceded. The Confederate Constitution is nearly identical to the United States Constitution, except that the president has a 6-year term. They acknowledge the perpetual existence of slavery, and each state is its own sovereign country. And each state can secede or withdraw at any time. If they don't like what's going on, they can take their ball and go home. So, at the time of secession, Union soldiers were living in Fort Moultrie on the northern coast of Charleston Harbor. Christmas night, Major Robert Anderson and 68 men will go out to Fort Sumter, where they will hole up, being surrounded by the South Carolina militia. Jefferson Davis, the first and only president of the Confederacy, who was elected because he wasn't at the convention in Montgomery, Alabama, was home with a bout of malaria, will send Confederate States of America General Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard to take charge. Interesting tidbit, P.G.T. Beauregard was the very best student of then West Point instructor Major Robert Anderson, who got him an extra year as a graduate assistant, so to speak, at West Point. So it's favorite teacher versus favorite student. Current president, the do-nothing president James Buchanan, elects to do nothing. He does try and send one shipment of food that gets fired upon and turns around. Fort Sumter is a brand new structure shaped like a baseball home plate in the middle of Charleston Harbor with walls 18 feet thick. Well, when Lincoln is inaugurated as president, he has the worst day ever. One of his children just died. His wife was understandably depressed. There was an assassination attempt on his way into town. He gets vilified for this in the newspapers. He's got to give an inaugural address. He finds out that not only does his cabinet not like him, they're not listening to him, but they're actually working against him on the worst day ever. Lincoln handles it and tells Major Anderson to stay where he is. Don't move, I will get you help. Well, when coming down to the deadline, Virginia secessionist Edmund Ruffin lights a cannon, firing a shot at Fort Sumter. When he does this, everybody jumps in, and on April 21st at 4:20 a.m., firing on Fort Sumter begins. When it is over, the first Union soldier is killed when his gun backfires on him. Robert Anderson and the men leave, taking the United States flag with them. After that, Virginia, Arkansas, and Tennessee secede, and the North Carolina, trapped between powerful Virginia and powerful South Carolina, also secedes. There is a picture of what Fort Sumter looked like when it was all said and done. The big problem is recruitment. The United States Army only has 17,000 men in it. Most of them are out west doing Indian fighting. So men sign up for a 90-day term, like one of the quick European summer wars that are going to happen right about the same time. Lincoln has got to be a Jedi in his handling of the border states. He doesn't want to push them too hard to swing them towards the Confederacy. And as soldiers are marching through Baltimore, there is a massive riot where, when it's a running gun battle as the soldiers run from one train to the next, that will injure or kill 12 civilians. Winfield Scott is the leader of the United States Army. He comes up with a plan known as the Anaconda Plan. It's going to squeeze the Confederacy to death, and it sounds scary. Step 1, blockade the Confederate coastline. Step 2, capture the Mississippi River. 3, drive straight on to the heart of Richmond, his great snake. He says he's too old for the job to lead the army, so he said without a doubt that man should be Robert E. Lee, who then turns the job down, and the rest is history. Ed Baker, Senator Ed Baker, says that the North must conquer a peace and dictate the terms before he himself is shot at Bull Run, Manassas. And as the people look at it on paper, the European powers, it looks as if there's virtually no way the Union can lose this war, as they have every advantage. All right, guys, that should do it. Crush this quiz, and I'll see you guys soon.